Okay, we're starting. Oh man, we've just wrapped up Tech Georgia, and we've got. So what's happening right now is we've run into some people that used to work at Dawg Post. So Dylan and I are joined by former Dawg Poster Parker Morgan. Parker,
glad to be here, guys.
Well, Parker, whatever. So I'll cut that, I guess, if we have to. But Parker covered the team in 2007, and Parker, if you remember correctly, that was the last time Georgia beat Alabama. And they got out to what was I felt like a decent lead, and they had to win the game in overtime. What do you remember about that game? And then we'll talk about the other games too, like 12 and 17 as well.
I mean, I think looking back, 11 years ago now, which is hard to believe, that was really before. I mean, Saban was a good coach.
That's a good point.
But Saban was not Saban. I mean, it's amazing what's changed with just his kind of aura in the last 11 years. But I remember that game. I remember specifically texting some friends who were amazed that as a UGA college student I was out there, working and covering the game, that I felt like Georgia was going to win. And you just saw that team kind of an attitude. And they did, I think, if I remember right, had a kind of an early lead, and then it wound up going to overtime before Scott Howard's infamous one and done call, baby. But you feel like this team is starting to really come together and believe. So, we just finished watching Alabama put a real beating on Auburn by the way that thing ended. But, it doesn't seem too much to imagine that Georgia's going to be difficult for these guys.
It felt much more normal to think that it would be a competitive game when they were struggling a little bit with Auburn. But, the way that here's the thing, Dylan, is the way that Bama can explode is a problem.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, we haven't even really seen the explosiveness of the run game as much, but it's still there. It's not like it isn't there.
Right.
I mean, but just the passing game is insane. I mean, they could light you up. I mean, just look at the Alabama-Auburn game right now. I looked at the score at halftime. It was 17-14, I think, right? At halftime, Alabama was up 3. And then I came in at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and Alabama had 45 points on the board. I mean,
that's the part that's, I think that's the reality of this thing that's concerning if you're a Georgia fan, is that, hey, Alabama can score, and they can score very quick. Georgia can too. But, the one thing I'll say about this situation coming into this week is Georgia usually dominates special teams. They were not unbelievable on special teams today. They were good. And against Alabama, they are going to have to play, and Bama too. Everything I said about Georgia is probably going to go for Alabama as well. Both of these teams are going to have to play their best games. We saw Michigan get destroyed today.
Yeah.
So now Parker, you're looking at a scenario where now suddenly the Big 12 championship totally matters for Oklahoma. The SEC championship totally matters for both Georgia and Alabama. We're taping this during Clemson, Carolina. I struggle to figure out how Carolina wins that game. But you got a Pitt situation with Clemson. They got to win that game. But Georgia and Bama are both going to have to really play well. If you do not play well in this game, either's team, you're going to lose. This is not, to me, a matter of, Alabama's that much better than Georgia. Georgia, as I've repeated many times now, Georgia's one of 3 teams, I think, that can beat Bama. Oklahoma, I'm a little squishy about, but definitely Clemson and Georgia can beat them. And Parker, if they don't play well, either team, they're going to lose.
I mean, I think the one thing for sure with the way that Ohio State put that beating on Michigan is that, not that, with the way Alabama plays, I don't think they would have ever been just assuming they're in no matter what.
They are now.
But, they probably, I would think they are. But I think Saban is going to convince them that if they don't win this game, Oklahoma is a Big 12 champ right there, a potential Big 12 champ is ready to move in. I mean, it's always been for Georgia that they're going to have to win this game to make the playoff. But, I don't think there's any chance that with what's the slight bit of potential chaos we've gotten already this weekend, and who knows what happens with these late kickoffs, I don't think there's any chance that Alabama doesn't come in thinking they have to win to get in. So Georgia's going to get their absolute best shot.
What is Alabama's best shot? That's the trouble. Georgia can't beat Alabama if they play their best game.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
don't see how that happens.
They're just too good. I think the big thing is you got to force them into fourth downs in the red zone. You got to hold. You can't let them in the end zone in the red zone. You got to limit the big plays, but you have to force them to kick field goals. That's the biggest.
Well, their
thing.
field goal kicker is an issue.
He's
not great.
An issue is a light statement.
Well, I just wonder if he'll get his ass together this week. You know, I don't know. Rodrigo missed it. See, I missed that. Rodrigo missed.
He missed a 48-yarder, and he hit off the upright.
Completely missed it. I was so busy today. I ran into a lot of people. Parker, do you think Georgia would trash Tech like that?
I did not think they would trash them like that. I felt pretty sure that Georgia would cover, but I did not expect a 38-7 posting at halftime where the game was over. I mean, it was over before that. You know, my feeling on Tech since Paul Johnson's been there, God, amazingly, 2008 was the first game now, is that it's a miserable experience because there's no benefit in winning. You're expected to win. If you lose, it is basically the apocalypse, and everyone in Georgia knows some Tech fan that's going to call you up and rub it in your face a little bit. But the one exception to that is the years where we've just really handed it to them is very satisfying. So I will just personally say I got a lot of satisfaction out of that beating today.
So I want to circle back to something real quick. And in 2012, Georgia had lost to Carolina 35-7. They had really slogged through the Kentucky game. And I remember going down to Jacksonville. I stopped on the way at y'all's house, which is on the way to Jacksonville. And I said, and Parker had written this thing on Facebook where he was done with it. He was tired of the negativity. They were going to play the number 2 Gators, who were good and undefeated. And that everybody was irritated. Like Georgia Nation was aggravated. Sean Williams was pissed off. Parker was pissed off. Everybody was aggravated because they weren't playing well and they knew they could play better. And that sort of reminds me of this moment right now that we're at, because I do feel like Georgia fans, Parker, are so good at dismissing their own chances. Now, true confessions here. My wife's a Clemson fan. She's been a Clemson fan for a long time. I've lived through a lot of Clemson sucks talk from my wife, and Clemson is pretty good at this too. But Georgia is so Georgia is so Larry Munson that it's hard to get past sometimes. So what were you thinking when you wrote that Facebook post? Do you still have it?
I mean, I could pull it up.
But what were you thinking? Were you had you had enough, or what was the situation?
No, that my memory is that kind of like you. I thought you first. It was a positive, like just what you said. It reminds me of the story about, I forget who was it that did something stupid. Said, "Well, I just got too much Bama in me."
Yeah,
it's like, I think just like you said, there's so much Larry Munson in the Georgia psyche of negativity. It's like, my God, people, like, here we got it all in front of us. So I wrote that little Facebook thing, just trying to get, we have a really good shot tomorrow, and we've got nothing to lose. And I think that's a little bit what you just said. And this is just all anecdotal, but just people we kind of talked to today around us in the stadium. Georgia's playing well. Alabama has everything to lose. I mean, I think if you go back to the beginning of last year and were to tell people, all right, guys, in the next 2 years, you're going to have an 11-1 regular season, undefeated in the SEC East, play for the SEC championship. The expectation would have been it would be last year, thinking, we got returning starter Jacob Eason. We've got Sony Michel, Nick Chubb. I don't think anyone would have expected this season to be that year where we have all this in front of us. So I think if Georgia fans are being honest with ourselves, this was beyond expectation. I mean, if this was your minimum expectation to go 11-1 in the SEC East, I can kind of see that because the East is down. But it's been a tremendous season. I mean, this has been a really
well.
tremendous
The
season.
Gators are going to turn out to be a top 10 team.
Yeah, the Gators are...
Which is hard. Dylan and I were talking about that.
Yeah,
That's
Now,
really hard.
Are they a top?
They blew out FSU at least.
Well,
which is not what it should be.
Look,
but-
you got to rank someone in the top 10.
I'm not saying they don't deserve.
And
to be
I'm
in-
with you here. I
but-
know where you're going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are they?
I would just say, like, this is as good as you could have possibly hoped for at the beginning of the year. And it's one game. I mean, Alabama has played, they are an excellent team, has beaten everyone. I don't know if have won a game by less
It's
than
all double-digit wins.
double digits. But you know what? Georgia's not too bad either. So I don't think there should be any negativity with the Georgia fan base this week.
But
we did what we want to do. We beat the hell out of Tech.
Right.
And we beat all our rivals. We had one slip up on the road where we just kind of got out of it late and it got away from us. But this should be a fun week.
Circling back, because I saw you in New Orleans. Circling back, if they win that game, probably that Michigan loss ends. Georgia and Bama both go. I think if
that's probably true.
So if Georgia doesn't lose that game to LSU, they're in right now. Is my guess.
I would agree with it just because of the. I mean, you look at just the strength of wins they would have. They'd have.
Well, they would have one more LSU win.
Yeah, they have a big win over what LSU was top 10 at that time, right? Or
yes.
Yeah, they were like 6 or 7.
No, I'm having a hard time. No, they lost the week before to the Gators,
Yeah,
so they were not.
So.
But they're probably 1 and 2, I would guess. Georgia and Bama are probably Bama 1, Georgia 2.
Oh, yeah, because Georgia was the 2, and they would not have been passed by Clemson. Listen, Clemson has really played a lot better these last 4 weeks, or whatever you want to call it. But Georgia, we keep talking about how they've turned it around, so-called turned it around. But really, they just didn't play well at LSU. Other than that, they've been beating everyone's brains in. I mean, think about it. They didn't beat Tennessee the way everybody wanted to.
Yeah, the Tennessee. I mean,
But
beat them
they
by a decent
beat-
amount. But
they-
they should have. I mean, with how Missouri kicked their ass, they should have done better against Tennessee. And they should. The Missouri game.
Well,
I
the
think
Missouri game, they won by 3 touchdowns, though, didn't they?
two. They won by 14.
that's right.
But they also had two they had a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown in that. And
That's
they won
right.
by 14.
The offense has picked up dramatically.
Oh, absolutely.
The defense, Jordan Davis has made a huge difference.
That play he made on, I think it was 4th and 6 or
Today?
something. Yeah, it was.
He ran down the line.
On the 48-yard line in Georgia Tech territory, and he got sacked there, and that was such a big play. That was such
I
a
don't
big
know,
play.
Parker. I mean, there's a lot of advanced degrees in this car right now. But what I don't understand about Paul Johnson is why make the game terminal in the second quarter? I know we're talking about Alabama, but why not just punt the ball there and be down 2 or 3 touchdowns, whatever it was? That ended the game.
If you want me to go on a whole
you can do it real quick.
podcast-worthy rant of Paul Johnson
Let's
being
hear it.
overrated
Go for
as
it.
a genius.
He's not a genius. I don't
laughable.
understand
The
that.
whole, I mean, I don't know what Mark Bradley's going to write about tonight.
Oh, my God.
With Paul Johnson being exposed again as just a total embarrassment. I mean, sure, why not take half the game away from your team as a possible way to score points? Like, that sounds genius to me. But the whole thing, like, Tech is just... the only thing I can assume in the Paul Johnson corner is he realized very early on that they were completely outmatched, and if he didn't score early, they had no shot. So that's why he went for it early, and he was fine with the fact that if they didn't get it, Georgia was going to get incredibly short fields and just end the game earlier than otherwise would have been ended. I don't think he's an irrational actor, so I will assume that's the case. But no, I'm with you. I could not believe some of those early, going for it on his, 45 midfield. It just made zero sense. And then Georgia, Jake Fromm throws bombs to McCole Hardman, and the game's over. I mean, the game was over early in the second quarter.
So here's one tweet from Mark Bradley, who the one. Hold on, go down. And I don't know Mark Bradley. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I don't know Mark Bradley. Scroll down. Beating UGA would be Paul Johnson's peak. And what's the next one? What's the next tweet? It says Georgia Tech's loss to is so bad. Paul Johnson found it funny.
Almost found it funny.
Yeah, there's a major football program in this state, and it ain't Georgia Tech. And focusing on Georgia Tech is the wrong thing right now. For clicks, for business, it's just not the thing to do. And I don't know if he's got like a thing for Paul Johnson or something, or a thing against Georgia. I never really found that he had a thing against Georgia. I don't know.
I never felt he has a thing against Georgia. I think, And I just say that I think there's a slight bit of over credence to what Paul Johnson does. I mean, he has made Tech competitive. And, this is, I guess, year 10. If
this is 11th year. He's 3-8 against Georgia.
He's 3-8 against Georgia, a little better than Chan.
Yeah.
But it's just Tech is what Tech is. It's an aberration when Tech beats Georgia, and it just has so happened that they've won the last two in Athens. Amazingly, it's hard to believe that they are the last team to beat Georgia in Sanford Stadium in 2016 was Tech. But other than that, Georgia's run off 2 straight years now of undefeated seasons at home. So
that 16 season had some difficult to weird losses.
Some tough losses in Sanford
the
Stadium.
Vanderbilt loss, the Georgia Tech loss,
the
Tennessee loss. I mean, those were all games Georgia could or should have won.
No, it was bizarre.
Certainly Tennessee, they should have won.
I remember the Vanderbilt game, I think, was the first one I covered for you.
Yeah.
And you were asking for what I was going to write about, and I mentioned something about how Vanderbilt could win that game, and your response to me was, Vanderbilt's not going to win this game.
Well, I was wrong about that. Thanks. I feel like I'm in the car with my wife now. Yeah,
I remember
are there
that.
things I need to do around the house too?
No, but
Do I
maybe
need to
don't
change
shoot
more-
it down so
Maybe
quick.
I should change more diapers.
Maybe you should, acknowledge my brilliance a little more.
You were a freshman from Austin, Texas, who was
apparently onto something. That you
well.
were.
If you were so on to things, your boy Mike Leach would be in the Pac-12 championship. Except he's headed to the frickin' Holiday Bowl.
The Holiday Bowl is a fine bowl.
It's a fun bowl. It's not a fun bowl.
It's a fine bowl game.
By the way, they could wind up Georgia. So there's a really weird scenario if they lose. They will 98% chance go to the Sugar Bowl. But there's a really odd and weird thing where they could play Washington State or UCF in the Fiesta Bowl. Like, that could totally happen. As uninteresting as that would be for everyone involved, it could happen. Parker, any interest in Georgia Central Florida?
The Liberty Bowl in 2010 was sufficient for me for Georgia Central Florida for my lifetime.
It was pretty boring.
I don't think anyone, except the whole UCF fan base, of course. Well, no, they won't even want it because they want to be in the playoffs. That's what
Georgia would beat them solidly.
I honestly think if they played, I think Kirby would say, we're not taking any shit about this. Like, we're not doing what Auburn did last year. We're going to go out there and just kill them.
And as a serious point, I mean, I had a good time. I went to the 2000, the Sugar Bowl against Hawaii. But I feel like every Georgia fan would approach it the same way.
Yeah.
That we were, we were kind of screwed a little bit getting that matchup.
Yeah,
and it's just like playing Tech. If Auburn had beaten UCF last year in the Peach Bowl, none of this stuff would have happened this whole year. We wouldn't have to hear about UCF. But they sleepwalked through that game and ended up losing, and now it's been UCF all season. And now especially, I don't if UCF's quarterback broke his leg or whatever happened to him last night.
That's the convenience.
Was awful.
Excuse.
Well, yeah, but I'm not glad that he's injured, but and at least hopeful for Georgia. I think the committee would take that into account as far as, I guess they can, as far as if they finish a certain level.
The discussion
to go
of
a New Year's Day 6 game.
It's just hard for the math to work for Central Florida. I mean, Alabama and Georgia won. Those two teams and Clemson and Notre Dame, I think, no matter what, will stay in front of Central Florida. I mean, Georgia loses, they still probably stay in front of UCF. UCF is 9. Georgia will be the 4 next week, and UCF will be the 8. So it's just hard to see how UCF gets there. But hey, you know what, man? It's not for me to crush their dreams. What I've gotten to the point of saying to people is, just line the shit up and play. You want to play the Gators so bad, which I think Central Florida could beat the Gators. You want to play the Gators so damn bad, get them in the Peach Bowl. You want to play the Dogs. You want to play Alabama. You want to claim a national championship, you bitches down there. Line it up and play. Not Auburn after they've played, and have zero interest in playing the game. Play someone. Now, that Central Florida, someone had Central Florida scheduled this year, and it had to be canceled. I can't remember if that was Tech or not. But Central Florida should be taken seriously. But what gets old is the same drumbeat from those clowns. Alabama won the national championship last year. It's funny because it's ironic that Alabama has to hear someone else chirping about a mystery national championship with Alabama 17. But it is also one of the most ridiculous things in sport. If Georgia beats Alabama next week, if there is a God, they will figure out a way to put Alabama with UCF and let them go and line it up.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome.
awesome.
And that's when the gods are smiling on you.
Oh my!
Right there.
How bad?
And
do
of course,
you think
that would
game
be impossible because of the Sugar Bowl.
How bad do you think that game would go?
Alabama would beat them by 3 or 4 touchdowns. No problem.
Only 3 or 4?
Yeah. It would be a significant beating. And I think Georgia would beat them by something like that too. Clemson, Oklahoma. I mean, teams that can really score. Central Florida's defense is bad.
But they could put up points on Oklahoma.
They could score.
They could put up points on Oklahoma's defense.
Oklahoma and Central Florida would be a fun game to watch because if you like, kind of like we talked about last week or yesterday about the, if you like option football, Tech is fun to watch. If you like points, Central Florida and Oklahoma would be a fun game to watch. But Parker, does it not get old?
It gets so old. I mean, I will say I don't get too worked up about it because it seems so clear with the way the committee at least has ranked them, especially putting LSU with 2 losses consistently ahead of them. That I used to get more bothered about stuff like that. I used to get much more bothered about like SEC talk and like the other teams. I'm like, you know what? None of this at the end of the day is going to affect. My main concern is whether or not Georgia, what they're doing. So, it gets old, but a lot of it I think is just ESPN needs something to talk about.
Yeah.
And they're going to have Kirk Herbstreit ran against them, then they're going to take game day down there, and it's whatever. It's such a it is very reminiscent to me, especially in the Hawaii thing just comes back. I mean, they were undefeated. Cole Brennan threw for 8,000 touchdowns, and they were just going to mop the floor with Georgia and show everyone, what a genius June Jones was and that offense. And it's just
lots of genius talk tonight.
Well, it's amazing how many geniuses are out there until they get exposed, and it is what it is.
Let me circle back to.
Why are you honking?
It's called riding in the car, or riding home, whatever. Hey, let me circle back to Georgia real quick too. Parker, this is the second year in a row where Georgia has controlled its own destiny in December. Did Georgia have a lack of imagination, or they get tired with Mark Richt, or what happened there that things now are the way that they are? Is it as simple as Kirby's that good?
I think you can look at what Kirby's been able to do years 2 and 3, and just kind of also see what Miami is up to over the last couple of years.
Golly.
Kirby seems to have been able to put him over the top. He's been bringing in talent, and yes, last year were mostly, Rick's guys, but which I think is even more, honestly speaking, to the point. Kirby took those guys, just like Rick took Donovan's guys, and put them over the top. Kirby, between what he's done recruiting and his coaching and his staff, Georgia's not the same that they were. 16 was kind of, his getting acclimated year as a head coach. And that's what's amazing, too, is he's still an incredibly, not just young age, but young and experienced head coach. But these guys came out I think you look at a game like today where it would be so easy to be looking ahead to getting in the playoff, playing Alabama. People have been talking about it since it was clinched, a few weeks ago. But they came out here today and just took care of business, and that game was over mid-second quarter. It was done.
Since they clinched, has there been a game where it was competitive in the second half? Florida for sure, but Kentucky was that game? I'm trying to remember that.
Well,
game.
They clinched after Florida.
Yeah, they clinched at Kentucky. Was that?
I don't think so.
Oh no, that's right. They clinched it with the Gators.
They had to be. No, they clinched at Kentucky.
Yeah, they clinched at Kentucky, but they had to beat Florida.
No, Kentucky was after. They had to beat Kentucky
to win
to clinch the East.
But if they had lost to Florida, they wouldn't have won.
Yeah, if they would the win against the game against Kentucky had to win no matter what.
Yeah.
Win or lose against the
y'all
Gators.
Y'all right against Florida too. They had to win the Florida game. If Florida had won, they were in the driver's seat. So they've been in. Since they dropped that LSU game, it has been in a have to win
But
situation.
what? Speaking of half, I mean, have they had a game? I mean, the Gators were. That was halfway. I mean, in the third quarter, that was still. The Gators got up 14-13, but from that moment, have they had someone within 7 points of them?
I don't think they've trailed since Florida went up at the start of the second half. I mean, they have just, since that game, I mean, they have been dominant.
And see, that's what everybody in these press conferences is wanting to know the answer to. Like, how the hell are y'all rolling like this? And Jay Fromm, when I was talking to him Saturday, I said, did y'all have any, people on chairs moments or anything like that? He said, he said, it's just normal stuff, nothing crazy, which means, yeah, there was probably some of it, but no one was screaming and throwing the chair. It was just, let's get our shit together, please. What we did at LSU is not who we are. And, I mean, it doesn't seem like who they are, not now. But they were certainly down at LSU. I know that.
Yeah, LSU was just bad. Was just not.
And they still could have won that game.
Well,
in the
and that's
fourth
what,
quarter.
as bad as LSU was, I mean, like Dean said, went down there, went to that game, roasted in the sun side of the section in Baton Rouge. But I mean, Georgia's in that game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
They've got a shot. Fromm takes a bad sack.
Yeah.
If he doesn't take that sack, if they get a little bit, they can probably kick a field goal, and it's 16-10 with about 12 minutes to play. Obviously, that didn't happen. They took the sack, they punted, LSU goes down and scores. They end up losing by 19 or 20 or whatever it was. But I don't think there are losses, and then there are losses like Tech had today. And I mean, Tech scored late to make it a 21-point loss. Georgia let it get away late to lose by 20. Georgia's not 20 points worse than LSU.
No, if they played right now, Georgia would win.
And they've performed since then more like Georgia's capable of. Now, clearly there's a discrepancy still between Georgia and Alabama, but it's not what Alabama did to LSU at night in Baton Rouge and the way Georgia lost. That's not the distance between the two teams. And I think, and I know I have my red and black glasses here, but I think we'll see that next Saturday, that it's going to be a competitive game. Georgia's by no means a favorite. By no means do I expect them to win, but I expect it to be competitive and close.
I think it will be close. Dylan, closing moments here?
I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a good game. I mean, Alabama has proven these last couple of weeks that they aren't the invincible Superman.
How so? With Citadel? I think Citadel is one of those games you just don't even pay attention to it, honestly. Because you can run on Alabama. I say this all the time. You can run on X.
Yeah, I mean,
and Georgia can run on anybody.
And I mean, the run game is killing it right now. DeAndre Swift looks he has been incredible these last few weeks.
Really good.
And Elijah Holyfield hasn't. It's not like he has been bad or anything. He's been great. And I think they need to be able to run the ball. It's going to be tough.
This is going to be a Jake Fromm game. If he plays well, they'll win. But he's got to play well.
Well, for him to be at his best, the run game needs to be going.
Yeah,
too.
Everything holds hands here. I mean, there's very little confusion about it. You're not just hitting forehands this week, right? I mean, you're going to have to play every single stroke, every single snap matters, every single moment matters in this game. Alabama has weaknesses. Tua has weaknesses. They're not obvious, but he struggles around the end zone, believe it or not. So there are weaknesses. He is deadly at midfield. He is deadly between the 40s. I mean, statistically speaking. So maybe avoid midfield as best you can.
I'm not worried about D-Bake. I'm not too worried about J.R. Reed. The people you look concerned about is Richard LeCount.
Richard LeCount's going to really have to play
needs
well.
to step up. I mean, he needs to step up big time. And Eric Stokes, I think, is a solid player, but hasn't started a whole lot of games here. He's gonna need to play out of his mind. They're gonna go to him quite a bit.
Parker,
I think the one thing not that I wake up at 4 a.m. and think about the national championship game
Sounds like
too often.
Yeah,
but
too often.
like you mentioned, every play matters, and the one thing about the game last year that I do think about from time to time is there was a moment where Georgia, I think they were up 20-7. Tua had just thrown his pick, which until 2 weeks ago was his only pick, and Georgia got the ball in good field position, and literally the next play, Fromm bounces it off a lineman's head. It gets picked by Alabama. They go down and score and make it a one-possession game.
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that obviously Tua is much better this year than he was in that one half of play. But that's the kind of thing, if Georgia gets those opportunities in this game, which I think they'll have a chance to make those kind of plays, they've got to make them. And I mean, I know we always, obviously football comes down to people making plays, but Georgia, the last few weeks, where they've been so good, and like you mentioned, they really have not been tested, is because they've capitalized on turnovers, they've capitalized on opportunities. And of all weeks to do that, next week is when you got to put it together, because if not, Bama typically makes you pay. They don't give you a second chance if you either miss an opportunity or give them a good look. And so that's what Georgia's going to have to do this weekend. And I think if they make some of those plays, they'll be right in it to win this game.
We're going to wrap it. We need to park. All right, so Dylan's going to send me this. We appreciate everybody listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.